Now we're up to ECL1, section letters H and R. Now here we see, as deciphered by me over the last 3 years, this is what's called your anchor point of your Egyptian cosmological linguistics research. Specifically, we see that letter H evolved over time from the Egyptian numeral 8, which is 4 palms stacked. Likewise, letter R evolved over time through Phoenician from the ram with his front legs turned up, about to headbutt another ram, which becomes from the V1 sign, which is number 100, or ram horn curled here, or the F8 sign, which is ram with its hind legs up, about to headbutt another ram. And this is number 100. Now, both of these signs are tested in the tomb UJ number tags. So here we see letter R, ram horn curl. Letter H is 4 fingers counting number 8, and this is number 100. And these are both found as tags attached to these wine bottles in 5300 A or 3345 BC. So when you look up a word such as ram, or the word red, which is blood spilled when rams battle, we find the following. Red, Wikipedia, goes back to the Proto-Indo-European invented words this and this, which is all linguistically invented fictional nonsense. So correctly, these are unattested. In unattested civilization, unattested word, unattested word. However, if we go to the oldest attested letters, we see that the red crown, which has a letter R curled at the top of it, is attested to the Naqada 2A period to 5600 A, or over 5,700 years ago, or minus 3,645 BC, and found on red-colored pottery, which has a red crown and a spiral, and the crowns are red. So here we see attested evidence of letter R found on a red crown dated 5,700 years ago in Egypt, which explains where the word red came from. However, to accept this as fact, you have to battle not only the linguists who believe in this Proto-Indo-European complete nonsense, or rather the old view, outdated view, but you also have to battle the Egyptologists on the second side, who say, oh no, Champollion says that the mouth sign is R, and it only made the R sound to the Egyptians because it matches Bernice, Cleopatra, and the Alexander cartouche. And they will defend this logic because to question this logic means you have to overthrow the entire system of what's called the Carto-Phonetic alphabet of Champollion and Young. But always return to these two signs when you ever have to battle linguists or an Egyptologist to get their mind correct. Just cite them to two UJ number tags. Shown here. 5,300 years ago, these are tested as letter H, the H phonetic, letter R, number 100, number 8, which they still are presently to this day in Greek numerals and Egyptian numerals, as numbers 8 and 100. Here we see a section on the larger goal, which means we have to overthrow the out of Sinai alphabet origin theory, which is basically trivial at this point. Which basically means overthrowing the idea that letter A comes from a dead inverted oxhead, which anybody with a working brain can now see that letter A comes from a hoe, first stated by Kircher as the hieroalpha. Letter A is a little more complicated, as the phonetic A is the first baby vowel that the Harpocrates child makes when he takes his fingers off his lips, which replaced the old view that linguists believe that the alpha sound was the sound of an ox breathing. Letter G, which is the color of green plants, comes from the earth god Jeb, with whose an erection makes letter G. You should be able to learn that. We will learn that. And then instead of the present-day Indo-European model that all of English words and Indian words came out of the so-called Kurgan culture or Turkey culture around the Caucasus Mountains, that the original home of the Indo-European and Afro-Asiatic languages is Abydos, Egypt, shown here about 5,500 years ago, next to the L bend, letter-shaped L bend, which is where the word letter L comes from, and letters, language, lingua, and so on. And before that, the Green Sahara, about 10,000 years ago in Egypt. This section goes over terminology. Here we see another Indo-European versus Egypt model, that the word night in Old English, Gothic, Sanskrit, and Latin and Greek comes from the N bend of the Nile, shown here in night view, rather than the Indo-European model. Here we see a Swiss working draft, Egyptian alphanumerics, coined the term 25 years ago. Independently, I coined the term Egypto-alphanumerics 2 years ago, both of us working on the Leidenite 350 papyrus. So if you start working on the Leidenite 350 papyrus to figure out language origin, which has 28 stanzas, and they're all numbered numerically. That's 6th, or that's the 5th goes up through here, and it stops at the 6th. This is the starting point of the 6th stanza. So these stanzas are all numbered 6 to 7. So this is the 6th stokia. So this means that the theme of this captures what's now in what we call digamma. And so on up through the 28 stanzas. So if we go up to, click down to chapters, and we go to the 100th stanza, which should be letter R. We see letter R. This should capture the 100 value God stanza. And this has been translated by Bernard Matthew as Amun being the supreme God. So the 100 values is the supreme God, but originally it's letter R, the 100 value sun, but Amun is a syncretism of all the gods previously come before him. But the sun god eventually got moved over to the 200th stanza. So now we see translated by Matthew, Ra is mentioned, and he's been displaced to the 200th stanza. And there's 2 R's here, 3 R's here, and so on. We see Juan Cole coined the term linguistic cosmology based on his study of the Arabic / Greco-Arabic model of how in Hebrew Allah was, the Islamic creator God, was said to have written a text on a kitaba, meaning to write on a myrtle leaf, 2,000 years before he created the universe. And then we see other terminology by Fardella, Barry. Here we see Tumuj's number 8 and 100 forming into letter R and letter H. Gadala talks about how the Leiden 350 papyrus forms a 28 letter number system, which is broken into enads. So the first 9 letters is enad 1, generally the birth of the first 9 gods of the Heliopolis. Then we have enad 2, which talks about the supposedly Osiris is chopped up into plants by the sickle at letter M. His phallus is thrown into the Nile, letter N. Gadala doesn't really talk about this, but he divides Leiden 350 papyrus into 3 enads. And the third enad is the rebirth of the sun, or something along these lines. Acevedo completed his PhD dissertation on alphanumeric cosmology. Here we see a building on the form. I began to introduce the term Egyptian cosmological linguistics as a namesake solution to a proposed experimental course program or department which I began emailing people about teaching at the University of Chicago. Synopsis. Here we see Plato studying Socrates as saying that the Egyptians or here we're saying that the Bible warns against teaching, believing in the alphabet as stoicheia of the cosmos.